Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us here today. And I'm very excited to introduce to you a very special session with Daisy Lee, Richard Sims, and Jamie Culbertson. Welcome, everyone.
Hi there. Good to see you.
Welcome. Great to see everyone.
Good to see you.
And today we have the pleasure to converse around our experience of the internal martial arts. So this is a Somatic Movement Summit, and I just couldn't help myself but to invite you to have this joint panel because there is an ancient tradition of martial arts in this world. And also, I would like to highlight at some point how martial arts practices, and especially the internal practices, are deeply, deeply somatic. So if you would be so kind to introduce yourselves and say a little bit about the discipline or method which you are practicing and through which lens you are joining here today. Who would like to begin?
My name's Rich Sims, and I'm an Aikido practitioner. So some people refer to that as Aikidoka, but somebody that practices Aikido. Okay. And Aikido is more of a modern martial art that was a culmination of a lot of older arts. But it was more modern, in the last century that it was actually formulated. So I've been practicing probably for over 30 years now. I started in my early 20s, and at my current place, I'm a collector. I like to think I've been through a few different dojos, and systems through the years and that sort of stuff. And where I currently practice, because I used to travel a lot, I've probably been there for 15 years now. So I'm a third degree black belt in that. And, everybody laughs because they're like, how are you only this? And I was like, yeah, this whole testing thing is just, it is what it is. It happens when it happens. So I'm not really hooked up on that. But I love this art, and I love everything about the blending and the somatic connection to this. Because I had studied a lot of harder arts, and then somebody said, hey, you should check Aikido out. And I'll tell you more stories later that make a lot more connections. But for now, that's me, and I will pass it on. We'll dive deeper as I'm sure this goes on.
Wonderful. And Daisy?
Well, my background originally, even though I'm known for Qigong, which is a 5,000-year-old art, it could be more or less, could be 3,000, but it's an ancient healing art. My beginning with it was previous to the Qigong, was actually Kung Fu. And even previous to that was a little bit of karate. And my Chinese friend said, what are you practicing a Japanese art for? You should be learning about your Chinese background. So I went into the Kung Fu. I loved it, but my life kind of took a sharp turn when a family member became very ill. And then Qigong came into my life. And at that point, it was all Qigong. And I realized how profound it was in terms of healing others, but also later came to realize how much it was healing myself. And I just felt it was such a valuable somatic practice, and easily accessible for the most young and the most elderly. My late teacher is 107, who passed away in 2017. And to see his vibrancy, to see all the women teachers I've had who are also incredibly vibrant and strong. You think sometimes with Qigong that is this soft art, it's very elegant and graceful, but there's an internal power to it that once you practice and learn to embody, you bring it into your daily life, and it's no longer the time that you practice in a gym or a dojo. It's what you do on a day-to-day basis. And it just helps you live more peacefully and helps the people around you to perhaps adopt and learn some of these techniques, because is so pivotal in how we put out our energy in the world. So that's my background. I teach a system that is for women called Radiant Lotus Qigong, but also Wuji Hundun Qigong, which is my 107-year-old teacher's 18 movements. And so it has both martial and a healing background. So it's a merging of the two with Wuji Hundun. Other systems of Qigong as well, but that's the crux of it.
Hello, everyone. I practice and teach Tai Chi, a couple forms, a short form, a long form, sword form, from the Yang family lineage. I started out in 1985, so long ago, right, with a short form. It was in a local, a new age kind of place. And during that time, there wasn't a yoga studio on every block. There just, you couldn't find everything, you know, that as much as you can now in terms of accessibility. So I actually enjoyed the class. There was about 50 people in the class. And then the teachers moved to Colorado, and I only really learned half of the form. So I practiced that for a while, and then that kind of fettered away. But then I got a brochure in the mail with one of the teachers there who was teaching the same form. So I said, great, I could pick it up and learn the other half of it. And this was from the Universal Healing Tao system with Montauk Chia, where I also learned a lot of inner alchemy and meditation, and discovered how Tai Chi was a moving meditation versus a sitting meditation. And I was one of those kids in school who was always bumping up and down their knee at the desk, like that, you know, so I learned really well through movement, which is why Tai Chi was so good for me. It really is self-awareness through movement. It's very somatic, though I didn't understand it at the time. I actually took the course because I thought it was cool, right? I grew up watching Bruce Lee and Kung Fu on TV and such. My brother had actually been studying Kung Fu and karate, and he used to come home on Sundays with bruised feet from competitions that he would do. And I wasn't as attracted to that. But then he switched over to Tai Chi, and I met his master at one point who said, okay, enough of the hard martial arts. Now we go inside. So it truly is an internal art. I've learned a lot about our energetic anatomy, which is visceral and real for every human. Some years later, I met another teacher, Master Huilin Huang, a Chinese man who was living in Miami. So I was able to see him more often. Even though we're in Boston, we would bring him up here. We would go on week-long retreats. And another thing that was such a beautiful benefit was the community of people who would return and want to learn and study more, and how we were so supportive in helping each other learn a new form. And I've just kept going. You know, there's different phases of transformation that a person goes through, whether you're learning to calm your mind or you finally got the moves. I mean, to be honest, Master Huang never cared if I learned the moves. He just wanted me to get the connections, you know, and we would talk about that in class. We would talk about it at lunchtime. And he was a great representative of someone who lived Tai Chi throughout the rest of the day beyond class. Even the way he would sit at the table, it was full of respect and, you know, a preference to connect with nature, you know, even in your relationships, having conversations and such. So I moved on to learn the sword form from him as well, which I really enjoy very much. So here's years later, I'm teaching, you know, it was actually probably around 2016. I just got a lot of calls one year. Could you teach at this hospital? Could you teach at the fitness club? Could you teach at our center here? Could you help us with the Wounded Veterans Program? And I just kept saying yes to all of them, and found myself busier teaching Tai Chi classes than anything else. I also teach the Alexander technique, and I weave that in. There is a Tai Chi class at the Alexander technique training course. And it's a great honor to bring this to people, even if they're not wanting to study Tai Chi, but they start to understand themselves through movement and bringing their awareness to it and the ability to make choices with the benefit of going slow.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you there, Jamie.
Mhm.
So the benefit of going slow. So can we share a little bit about how do we take it from the form to the inner exploration? Because isn't that the mastery piece to all these different practices?
Mhm.
Because in the beginning, I mean, I've studied some karate, some kung fu, and some other styles, and qigong, and so on. And it's like there's a moment when you go from form to sensing on a deeper level. Can you share a little bit about your own shift in regard to that?
Thanks for that question, Gayatri. I feel that with Qigong, it's naturally a slow moving art. And in fact, it was the predecessor to the martial arts used for healing mostly. And even though there are components in certain styles that are called hard style Qigong, but most styles of Qigong are used for healing. And it's one of the more common elements of Qigong in whatever system you practice is that it slows you down. And when we slow down, it levels out the intensity of information that might be coming at you. And so that slowness also gets reinterpreted through the body, through the breath, through our alignment with the greater forces of the earth and the sky. We always depend on these forces. We might forget that we depend on these forces because we're often in relationship with people. But what Qigong is so great at is that it brings you back to nature, your own personal nature when you're investigating and exploring who you are. But really, when we do Qigong, it's often in nature, as often as we can. And then we really understand what is swirling around in the world, what is capturing our attention. Is it the television screen or the computer screen or our iPhones? Or can we break away from that and relate human to human, human to nature? So the information surrounds us, but it's what Qigong does is it slows you down enough to capture the subtle information that is so valuable for self-healing. And so this is the reason that I teach, because I think in our modern times we might have forgotten. We might have been pulled in and kind of sucked in by technology and news, situations outside of ourselves, but we always have to come back home to ourselves. So the more peace and equanimity you can find within your own body, the more you influence the field of energy outside of yourself. So that's my thought on how we can help each other.
That slowness that you're talking about, and I'll tell a little story, and it'll lead into this. I had mentioned earlier I had studied a lot of different martial arts, and even from all different parts of the world, and they were mostly hard, And I was a young 20-something guy that I was having fun. I loved to wrestle, do all jujitsu, all of these things, and somebody said, "Boy, all those things seem completely opposite of who you are, Rich. You should check this thing out called Aikido." And Aikido is actually a combination of 3 different kanji. So it's Aikido. And it's, depending on who you talk to, it's translated a bunch of different ways. But I think of it as the way of the spirit of harmony, of how do you blend with different people and things. And a story that hooked me was I was pondering in my youngness of, okay, if I wanted to hurt somebody, I know all these ways to hurt people. And is that what this is about? Is that what martial arts is supposed to be about? Like, that seems problematic to me. And the first person that I studied with, who was actually one of the first people that was sent over to the States to bring Aikido, in the 60s, I believe, he had come over here. And he told a story about if you're walking down the street and you're walking one way and another person is walking another way, and the other person out of nowhere all of a sudden just starts screaming at you and trying to hit you and do all of this stuff, it's like, you have a choice to make. And we were like, oh, okay, what's the choice? He's like, well, he's obviously trying to hurt you. So you could decide to collapse his windpipe and break his arms and do all of this damage, and he's going to be devastated for the rest of his life. It's like, but I just want to plant the idea that as a practitioner of Aikido, you're supposed to recognize that no human being, if all is okay with that person, should be attacking another human being. So you as a practitioner of this art should recognize that there's obviously something amiss or wrong going on, and you should become responsible for his safety now. So you're responsible for the person that's trying to do you and anybody around you harm. And I was like, okay, wait a sec. That's a different thing here. So I like to think about this as both a mind and a body sort of art, just like I'm sure you guys would agree with your arts as well. There's this mental component and also this physical component, and how do you blend those two when you're doing these things? In Aikido, usually you see two people doing it together. So it's a paired practice. There's people, and I've done it solo a lot, but it's basically a paired practice. And all of the different throws and everything else that people do are wonderful. It's been compared to dancing. There's a book called It's a Lot Like Dancing. You blend and you connect with that other person. And these moves are really great. I love them. But honestly, as the years went on, I like to think of those more as just physical riddles that we were being taught. And the practice became slowly not doing the actual moves and everything else. But like now I like to think of my practice as what I'm doing before that even starts. So when my partner even starts approaching me, how am I connecting with that person? And how are they connecting with me? And that's when it starts, before anybody sees anything. And it's that connection, that blending, that slows things down, that lets you be with that other person, that lets you feel little movements, that even if they're not moving, lets you feel structure, lets you feel, warmth, lets you feel fear, lets you feel hatred, and also lets you feel love. And those are the things that draw me to this. And some people look at me like I'm crazy, and they're like, oh, wait a sec, you're just flipping people through the air. Or other people that don't like to do that are like, well, no, we're just dancing. I was like, oh, there's so much more to this. There's so much more than these moves that we're doing. And that's, without diving into, too deep, one of the things that I really love. It's that connection with not only other people, but then how does that lead to connection with yourself? And how do you cultivate that more? As you can tell, I love to talk about this, so I will I will pass it on.
A great conversation. One of the benefits of going slow is for the nervous system in particular. So we have when someone comes at you, whether physically or even verbally, it could excite the defense mechanism we have, or set off the fight or flight, right? So that's one neural pathway. The other neural pathway is more chill. It's like, oh, I think I'll have dinner. I can digest my food without problem. I feel safe, right? And so Tai Chi can help you to flip the switch into that more relaxed, contained avenue for your nervous system. You can't have both on at the same time. So you can flip the switch to more presence, more calm, more ease, and breath, right? Really beneficial for everybody's got a story of some upset that happened in their life, and they could be continuing to live that. So it really helps you experience yourself really differently. And Tai Chi is a form of Qigong, right? The grandparent of all, the Qigong. I remember when my teacher would always end the class with some kind of honoring, and he'd bring his hands together. And I asked him a couple times, I studied with him for about 20 years before he passed. And I asked him a couple times what that meant. And the first time he answered, it was more like, Tai Chi is the art of one fist, but don't fight, don't use it. So if you feel the urge, I said, no, not necessary. And it would always be on the center line. The second time, years later, when I asked him about it, he said, this is nature. This is winter, spring, summer, fall, and this is the earth. Protect it. Which just blew my mind. It touches me every time I think about that. Because our connection to nature is innate and natural, and we do lose sight of that through our technology and the interactions and the way that we're trying to manage the world, manage our finances, the job. And it turns into a kind of manipulating so you can get what you want in some ways. But what if you learn to manage yourself? Not control, but manage and find ways to allow for flow, the flow that's there underneath any kind of stress or holding, right? So if you do a Tai Chi move and your shoulder goes way up there, maybe you do that when you reach to get a glass for water, and because you're going slow, you can learn to reduce that. So you're not doing all this extra work with your body. And in doing so, it's like, wow, is that my arm? Really, I've never felt my arm so soft or connected or free, So there's a lot of surprises that can happen. And, it is a practice. So if you let it be different each time, same form, but it's a different day, you can really discover something new about yourself. And when Rich talked about the mind, it wasn't too long ago, maybe 100 years, that treatments for the human being was either mental or physical, never the two together. And over time, people finally started to discover that this whole mind, body, spirit is a really one unified experience for a human. And as you start to get in touch with that, you do feel a calmness come over with your mind. Your mind isn't out here chatty, but you can notice that. In fact, perhaps the highest quality of the mind is to focus. It can also be very chatty and busy, but if you focus, you can come more into that one-pointed mind. And then surely you can bring that into your life, be outside of your practice. Yeah.
It just brought to mind, the most essential thing in all our arts, I believe, beyond the form. When we talk about beyond the form, is breath, and it's where we can slow down when there's chaos around us.
Yeah.
And so when I find myself in an intense situation, I remind myself, breathe slower, deeper, longer, smoother, and that seems to be the thing that I start with. If I can't control anything else, I can at least, as you said, Jamie, manage my breath. When you manage your breath, then the body slows down again. And so the panic dissipates and the anxiety dissipates. So very interesting. I'm loving what Jamie and Rich are saying, and I feel like I need to study Aikido. I need to go deeper into the martial arts and Tai Chi.
I know when I saw an Aikido demonstration some years ago, I thought, oh, I want to learn that too. But I think I may need another lifetime because, you just don't want to just do Bloomingdale's and get all these different forms. You want to practice well and try to really go forward with one form or one move.
But it is so fun to try. That's Daisy. I felt the same way. I was like, ooh, I have to go and try these now again.
Me too, for sure. So it's wonderful how we can inspire each other in this way. So now we have spoken a little bit how we can move from form to the formless in a way, how to go that we are we're cultivating our practice to be able to meet violence, but we're not creating violence. And I love what Rich was saying, that in the end, the goal is love. And Jamie, you were saying that protect the earth. So as you have each spent many, many years cultivating your abilities within your discipline, can you share a little bit about your relationship to discipline? Like, what is because discipline is almost like a bad word these days, but I think discipline is very, very important. It holds a lot of gems and keys while we are refining or perfecting our somatic abilities. So can you elaborate a little bit on that and how it has been in your own life?
I feel that discipline is necessary if you're going to make progress. If you don't have that focus and concentration, you'll be distracted easily. But if you have a passion for something that you love to do anyway, discipline doesn't even really come into that harshness of the word doesn't come into play as much. But I do think we need it if we want to make progress and to cultivate ourselves and evolve in our practices.
Mm-hmm.
Just I was just in a conversation about this with my wife, actually, and she was just looking for a latest, hobby or thing. She said, she's like, I need a new thing. Like, I'm just bored with my stuff and everything like that. And she said, well, you have your Aikido. You're so passionate. And she used to joke about, like, oh my God, he's just doing this again. And if he's not doing it, he's talking about it, or he's reading a book about it, or he's like, that's always been one of your things. And she was surprised. She was like, well, it's easy because that's a thing. You go to that because you always want to be doing it. And I said, what makes you think that? And she's like, well, you love it. And I was like, yeah, but I said, trust me, there's plenty of mornings, especially I live in Chicago and it gets cold out here in the winter. And, when I look and see, oh, with the wind chill, it's minus 50 degrees below zero. And I just jumped out of bed and it's 6 a.m. and I know I'm going to be standing on a really cold mat. Okay, racing through my mind, maybe it's like, oh, the bed's really warm. Like, I just don't want to, or maybe I had a late night or something. And it's not a thing that every, day, I want to do this. I want to do this. But how do you do it anyway? And that's this discipline thing. And she was kind of surprised because she hadn't thought about it. She just thought I'd love to do it. And I said, no, that's the discipline part. And we all miss, we can't be perfect. And a lot of people get down on themselves like, no, I have to do this so many times. Do something, is what I tell everybody. If I can't make it down to the dojo, I try to pick up, a jo that I have. It's like a staff or something I can do solo. Just do something. If you can't do an hour, do 5 minutes. Do something. That's the discipline's more about that. Come back after you didn't do it. Keep coming back. And that's how I like to think of the discipline. It transfers into every area, even away from the martial arts of just life. It's okay, I failed, but I'm going to come back now. And I'm going to try it again. Oh, I ran into the wall. Okay, but I'm going to try it again. And I'm going to try it with a smile on my face. And I'm going to jump in and we'll see how it goes. So that's discipline to me.
I like the smile part. A lot of power in a smile.
A lot.
I think my practice over time, it ebbs and flows, If you teach a lot of classes, you're sort of practicing, but it's different, because half your attention is with your students. So having your own personal practice is very important. And actually, if Daisy, you can help with this. It isn't the word qigong, isn't the kong part mean your discipline, your practice of qi energy, right?
Yes.
So that itself is a wonderful translation that's very poetic to me. And it's not just I'm practicing where to put my arms and such, but I'm actually practicing flow and getting in touch with energy, perhaps conduits for where energy would go naturally. And I have a class that met all through the winter these last 2 years because they want to practice. And it's cold in New England. And if it was below 20, we found a way to go inside. But we were outside and I said, wow, you're going to be there? Then I'll be there. I'll show up for you. And it's true, quality of practice is better than the quantity in terms of an hour versus 10 minutes. But I remember even when I was down for a week, I was sick. And when I got up and I stood there and I kind of wanted to find a little bit of chi between my hands, but it was like, going. So I thought, interesting. I've never not felt it, So, but before long, you could get in touch with this electromagnetic field and start to feel that through your own biology. And it came back to me there. And practice mostly for me is because I feel better afterwards. Even if I grumble towards the practice moment, every time afterwards, I feel better. And as I go on in years, there's even more benefit to get a gentle flow through my body. When I might be crick on the way there, if it's early in the morning, then once flow happens, you have this softness and, gosh, I didn't come into Tai Chi thinking that I would have it as a lifelong practice, but I wouldn't be without it now. Qigong and Tai Chi, we start every class with Qigong movements and then come into the Tai Chi. I also love seeing my students progress and for them to find and have their own experiences. So Mantak Chia once said, if you do it, you'll get it. If you don't do it, you won't get it. Now, whatever it is trying to let us know, but health, well-being, ability to protect yourself. I think the original meaning of warrior was the protector instead of the conqueror, and that came through politics and governments, I suppose. But to be able to protect yourself and loved ones is where many of these martial arts, in terms of the fighting aspects, come from. We forget about that,
It's important. And so as we're cultivating ourselves in this way, what are some of the qualities that may be flowering in ourselves as a human being led by these different traditions and the support of the method and the practice and the inquiry?
I believe that for me, which is actually a difficult thing because I grew up in a working family with 100 acres of land, so we were farming. We had greenhouses and vegetables on the land, which was very family dependent. So my working gene is very strong in me, and now next year I'll be 60, so I'm learning to play. And interestingly, they use the term playing Qigong or playing Tai Chi. I don't know if they play Aikido, but the idea is that there's a lightness to the practices that we do, much as there is a sense of discipline if you really want to learn and progress. There is this sense of play. And I have to stop myself sometimes if I'm working in the garden and I see a lot of weeds or I see a pest that needs to be managed. Then I at some point you have to stop with all the doing and working and come into balance and bring in the play. So even changing one's mindset in how your perception of this situation, this environment that you're in, changes what happens inside. So I'm working on playfulness.
Daisy, I'll jump right off of that because I actually use that not in an Aikido class, but I use Aikido in a lot of the trauma work that I do and outside of the things with with anxiety and all of that. And one of the things that people have noticed I say a lot is, let's play. And it grew out of this. And another funny story is I've been dubbed the smiling Aikidoka, because you know how sometimes people are very serious in a dojo, and there's different exercises in Aikido, one's randori, where they'll literally have like 7 people like trying to get you and grab you, and you're supposed to be very serious because they're trying to get you. And a few times they're like, people have said, that was great, could you please stop smiling? And they're like, why are you smiling? And I was like, because this is so much fun, and with this speed and this connection that we all have. And one of the tenets of Aikido, actually from O-sensei, the gentleman that created it, was to practice joyously or joyfully. That was supposed to be a part of this connection with others, that you have to have that joy, that love. And that's what this is all about. So absolutely, that's what this is all about. It's that cultivating that love, that joy. How can you do that in yourself and then bring that out to others, even during conflict? Which is, again, that how do you become responsible for other people's safety at the same time protecting yourself? So yeah, play, love it.
Play, wonderful. If that's all you practice, you'll be fine. whatever you do, the softness that can be understood or learned or eventually experienced really brings that joy along a little bit, because it's not just soft, I'm relaxed, I'm passive, not at all. There's a saying called steel wrapped in cotton with Tai Chi. And it represents the bones are hard, the soft tissue all around, you want that to be soft. So there's a great deal of strength and structure within. And softness can bring a peaceful feeling, So I like that I've learned to be less reactive, or at least notice where that's coming on. And I could just pause and breathe, as Daisy said, find my feet, find the support of the earth, which is the most stable thing we've got. So many things are impermanent, yet we try to hold on to those too. And that could cause some holding in the body or some other kind of struggle. And if you want your practice to be like it was last Tuesday when you had this big wow happen, it's really not to be repeated. It has to be, well, this is this Tuesday or Wednesday, and what's it going to be like for me now? What can I learn outside of my own intellect of how I want to approach my practice? And through that softness, something could occur. Some new information could come because I'm not busy trying to make something happen or repeat something that happened already. So I go away from having practice and said, this is a good day. If I have practice, it's a good day. And it does bring a smile. And then I can bring that to my interrelations. And, it just keeps on giving, I could say.
Yeah. And what's coming to mind is the reverence for our lineage. And also what's coming to heart is a master that I have been studying with, and to see these qualities of a human being flowering, to see that it is so deeply rewarding, and it's humbling, and it's inspirational, and it's just, how can we practice and live in a way that we blossom in our full capacity, this ability to, like you all said it very, very nicely, the playfulness and the to widen the range. How can we respond in different ways? And I love this when you see a well-practiced master who's so, deadly if they want to be, but mostly or always they're just love and kindness and patience and peace and this deep, deep, deep wisdom. And so I just want to acknowledge the lineages, and just, if anybody of you want to share, what is your relationship to your own lineage?
Gayatri, by relationship to our lineage, it's interesting that my family lineage was lost because my grandfather and my great aunt, who were kung fu masters in southern China, they passed on during the Cultural Revolution. And so it was lost to my mother's generation, our generation, which was one of the impetuses for me going back into kung fu initially, to discover if the southern style was something that resonated. But I didn't find it per se my exact lineage. But I think that the qigong, which is the healing aspect of all the arts, that is the lineage. The healing aspects in all forms brings us back to our root compassion, our root desire to do good and to support healing in ourselves and others. So, whether it was Wuji Hundun Qigong, my 107-year-old Master Duan's Qigong, or the 5 animal forms, or especially Radiant Lotus Qigong, which is a combination of teachings from my Tibetan teacher, my Chinese teachers, and my Western teachers, and all their intentions. I think that at the core of all of that is the desire to support healing. And we bring in playfulness. For me, it's a learned kind of thing. But I think that that's what we can offer each other. And that's what my hope is for everyone that practices with me.
Lineage is tricky for me. Because I think about it in so many different ways. And if I think about teachers, that's one way that I could think about it. And I've had, a bunch of different teachers throughout the years, over these years. I mean, 3 of my very first person was Akira Tohei. Like I said, he came over to the States. He found Aikido after he was a kamikaze pilot that didn't get to kamikaze, and all of a sudden the war was done and he was lost, and found Aikido, and it transformed his life, and then brought it to the States. Very disciplined, very serious. This was a martial art that also had love and everything else, but you were serious. And then years later, Sato Sensei, who I'm still with, he has Grateful Dead tie-dye hakamas that he doesn't wear them to class, but people have bought them to that. He loves the Grateful Dead music. And I was like, that's great. I didn't wait a sec. This is, and it just brought in a whole new twist into this thing of like, oh, you can also, wait a sec, this is wild. And then Paul Linden, who some people look at what he does and goes, that's not even Aikido. What is this dude doing? And that unfolded a whole nother aspect of this, going, oh, he's found this other, but there it is. There's Aikido. So lineage is weird, because, and then I also tie in all of these other arts. And I think I like to tie myself into just all of these. The different arts that both of you do are part of my lineage in my mind. It's like we're all these searchers, and we're all traveling this path to be better, and for ourselves and for others. And it's a combined lineage of all of us. So I don't want to dive too deep into it, but yeah, that's how I think of lineage.
Fascinating. I would share that since there were 2 Tai Chi teachers for me, first it was Lon Tak Chia, and when you would get in a conversation with him and he started talking about his teacher and his teacher's teacher and how they had to travel winding roads up to the mountains to find the caves that they were meditating in, and learning what the inner alchemy process was, coming up with formulas and such, that kind of wakens me up to a really deep place. And when I got certified to teach the short form, for some reason, the certification, the paper, all that wasn't so important to me. So it took a while for me to show up for that. after practicing plenty years. But when I did get the certificate handed to me, there was almost this feeling of this big row of people behind me, like, like, oh, wow, I'm part of a lineage. It was like a little wake up moment for me, And I said, in the linear nature of time, I was like put right in front of the line, to then share with others. My other Tai Chi teacher, Master Huang, he did grow up during the Cultural Revolution, and he made it little by little family members to the United States. And when he felt like it, because he didn't like to talk about it too much, but we'd sit over dinner or tea in the evening, he would tell us stories of the struggle over there, and couldn't go to school anymore. And he found a master a few blocks away, and he'd go be with him every day. I mean, his mother was a doctor, but she had to wear a sign that said, "I'm stupid," and it's a whole different cultural reality than I grew up with. So I saw his commitment to what was true, right? I'm not going to say what was true for him, but to what we find as a truth in Tai Chi in terms of our connection with nature and the evolving nature of ourselves. And which is why I said, even when he sat at a table, he had a certain kind of ease and softness. In fact, sometimes we'd have a really intense long weekend, and we'd take Monday off, and we would go up north and we would go skiing together. And we'd be on the chairlift and we're talking about things, and he'd say, "Kidneys under lungs." Like, this is, I used to be a ski instructor, so he was asking me things, and he was like, how he is learning to make his turns and keep a balance. Kidneys under lungs, so that he could stay on his back and not lean over and be head first down the hill. And I thought, I've never forgotten that. I use that in my classes, what if that's the case, So since he passed, it's up to a few of the dedicated students that he had to share his wisdom and his understanding. And I wish we had more videos, but we don't, not to, I mean, I remember his moves, but it was more like just to cherish some of his wisdom, because during the evenings we would have conversations after practicing all day, and he would take out the Chinese classics and he would talk about a particular chapter or point of view. And I'll finish this question with this piece here. It was my first week with him, and we did sword form in the morning and long form in the afternoon. I didn't know either of the forms. So I thought, well, I'll just stand in the middle and I'll just follow along. So that night I said, how does one learn this form? It was 108 movements. It was new moves, complicated for me. And I never forget his answer. Was surprised the heck out of me. He just said, curiosity. If you're curious about what this is, you'll come back and you'll practice, you'll find out, you'll ask questions. So that's always stayed with me too, in terms of a practice as well. And I miss him in person, right? But and he was a human being. Everybody has these faults and weaknesses too, but he was a beautiful human being. And I've learned so much, and I try to bring it forth, right?
Jamie, you really honor your teacher, the way that you're speaking about him and carrying forth what he taught. I think what you shared was so beautiful and honoring. Just one thought, that that curiosity creates discipline.
Yes.
That's what I got from that.
Yeah, makes you return.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I look forward to studying more with you, Stacy, in the future when we have a chance, and Rich, to meet you as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing. And now we are coming towards we're nearing the end of the conversation. And so I just would like you to have the opportunity to just share like a last statement or so on what we have been speaking about here to the listeners. And Rich, can we start with you?
Sure. The point of all of this, of why I do it, and I keep this tucked in my mind, is whether you're practicing alone or with people or that sort of thing, or whatever system you're studying. My goal is to try to cultivate in myself, and then also teach people to have an open, relaxed, caring, big emphasis on caring power. Okay. Not only towards yourself, but others around you. And that's what it really comes down to, is how do you have this relaxed, caring power? And then you can have choices and affect not only yourself, but other people in the world. That's what this is really all about. It's not about the moves. It's not about the exact, way we all achieve this, but it's a bigger, greater picture. And that's what I like to keep kind of tucked in the back of my mind.
Thank you. And Jamie?
I love that aspect of self-care for sure. The martial arts aspect for me, because I don't wish to fight, but it helped me to understand the moves. What is the application of this particular move? And yeah, sometimes a little spirit inside is going, I'm throwing him over my head. But that's just to remember the move and to recognize truly that I don't want to have an opponent anywhere. In Tai Chi, it's really about union. You might have yin and yang, which is a seeming opposite, but it's within the circle of one. So even as I've heard only recently, if you have two high-level Tai Chi masters and they come together to fight, they can't find each other. There is nothing to fight because there's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to grab and then move, so because they're so soft and structured and connected. And I just love that story. And I would love to, come into that embodiment myself at some point, who knows? But I want to continue to grow in this level of deepening my mind-body embodiment, if you will. And this truly is a somatic practice, the internal arts. I didn't know what that meant when I started, but it really is self-awareness through movement. And when you choose this kind of movement, there's benefits you don't even realize that's happening when flow starts to happen. Or, you all of a sudden you look like you lost 10 years, because the stress is falling away. So peace can be found within, and it's a worthy journey to get in touch with that.
That's really beautiful, Jamie and Rich. In terms of final thoughts, I'm going to take a cue from Rich that because the world is so serious at this time, that find a reason to smile. And just as you might have heard that if you wag a dog's tail, that they start to get happy and they start to wag, they start to feel the joy. I feel that when we smile, that it sends energy out in the world in a positive way. And we bring healing without having to create anything. We just be that ourselves. So I hope everyone has a reason or finds a reason to smile and to be grateful. Thank you.
Wow, wonderful that you've all been sharing your wisdom and your experience and inspiration with us all. And thank you everyone for listening to this great session with Richard Sims, Jamie Culbertson, and Daisy Lee.